You're looking at a price of Bitcoin per coin of about 700,000 US dollars. The price of Bitcoin is extremely low right now compared to what it will be in the future. It's a real pain to have to go and pay someone 2% every time you land in a new airport to get access to their currency.
There are people in power that are benefiting from this 2% that you're talking about.
Without a doubt. I don't think that the next reserve currency of the world is going to be associated with a country. This is like a miracle. We're kind of living in the future, but with a lot of the braces and the belts of the past. Does it make sense that because I have a United States passport, because I was born in California, that I have all these rights, whereas a kid that was born the same day as me, but was born a few kilometers south in Mexico, doesn't have these rights because they were born in a different plot of land. Over the last few years, humanity has almost gotten to a stage where we've forgotten how to get along with people that had different views. There's a barrier to people understanding crypto is they don't understand money. Forget about crypto, they just don't understand money. And gosh, I'm giving my funds to the bank so that the bank can use my funds to lend out and make money on those funds. And I'm paying the bank for the privilege of then using my money in Africa. When you send money from South Africa to Zimbabwe, there's a big remittance corridor. A lot of Zimbabweans are living in South Africa, they're sending money back. Pretty much the standard fee that people are paying for that privilege is 10%.
Wow.
I think there's a tremendous amount of injustice there, where you have the intermediaries that are making a lot of money off the back of a lot of poor people around the world. The inflation hits the poor the most. In South Africa and other places of Africa, there's a lot of poverty. If you're driving from one place to another, you're going to pass a lot of people that haven't eaten. For Bitcoin to become a little bit more prevalent in the world, I think we're going to have to see some crises in our traditional financial system. The US dollar cannot exist forever. So if you go from a world where the US dollar exists and it's the dominant currency and it's the reserve asset to a world where it doesn't exist anymore, that transition has to be tumultuous. Change is inevitable. It really is inevitable. And we have a difficult time perceiving that as humans when you're in a particular society, in a particular paradigm. But when paradigm shifts come, they can change very, very quickly. They're oftentimes huge shifts that are sudden, that change the nature of power in the world, that change the nature of wealth in the world. The price of gold altogether is probably between, or the value of all gold that exists right now in the world is anywhere between, let's say, 12 to 17 trillion US dollars. Anything that is digital, that has kind of gone on to replace its analog version, has not just gone to match the value of that analog version, but has gone and exceeded it by many orders of magnitude. We're living in a dog-eat-dog world. I think a lot of the crypto assets that exist today will go to zero. Crypto is not for everybody at the moment.
Got the whole crypto world going wild. Money blockchain, she's the queen of the game. Stacking crypto like it's her claim to fame. If you want success, then take a look away.
Hi, Farzam.
Hello, Bonnie. How are you doing?
Great. It's so good to have you here. You were born in the US, grew up in Kenya, and now you run a very successful crypto exchange called VALR in South Africa. And given that you've seen all these different cultures, here's my question. Some people are pushing this idea of having a global currency. Do you think we need a global currency? And doesn't it make more sense to have different currencies for different countries?
So I think we definitely need a global currency for the world ultimately. We're heading towards that, but there's going to be quite a transition to make that happen. And I think all you need to do is look back in time, the history of our money, and you realize it wasn't that long ago that we didn't even have national currencies. In many countries around the world, the United States, South Africa, other places, banks themselves issued their own currency. And so the currency that we had was just receipts of, let's say, gold that was deposited at a bank. And depending on how that particular bank was doing, would depend on would determine how well the money that you had was doing. And then now it's kind of standard that each country or region has its own currency. But I think ultimately it's a real pain to have to go and pay someone 2% every time you land in a new airport to get access to their currency. So if I were to tell you in two different cities, city A and city B in Taiwan, that you had to go and exchange your money in one city for, the currency of another city, or even worse, from one neighborhood in your city to another neighborhood currency in your city, that would be a real pain. And that's kind of the way that we are in the world right now. It's a no-brainer to me that we are moving towards that. It will take some time. There will be some huge adjustments in my view. But The world not only needs a world currency, but it deserves a world currency in time.
But I feel like there are people in power that are benefiting from this 2% that you're talking about.
Without a doubt. And I think that's the story of humanity. You always have vested interests, and vested interests want to hold on to the power that they have so that they can benefit from the status quo. But I think the story of human progress is something that has always happened and will continue to happen against the vested interests of that time. And that's what I talk about. I think there will be some struggles between the vested interests and the status quo and progress. But I think progress ultimately prevails when you look and zoom out enough. Progress prevails for humanity. So I'm a big optimist about where we're going for humanity. I do think, as I said, there'll be some bumps along the way, but ultimately the people will prevail.
Do you think Bitcoin will be the obvious choice for this global currency?
I think we have to have some humility, right? And to say, okay, what are the options? Up until now, obviously, the United States dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Before that, we had different reserve currency. We had the pound, and we had, currencies from Spain and from Netherlands, and if you looked at different epochs of history, you have different reserve currencies of the world. I don't think that the next reserve currency of the world is going to be associated with a country. And I think there are a few reasons for that. We're living in it, but the fact that you're in Taiwan, I'm right now in Hong Kong, I didn't know where you were, and we're having a seamless conversation with this thing called the internet and this video chat. We take that for granted now, but this is like a miracle. We're living in the technological future, right? The internet has brought us all together. This mechanism of intercommunication across the entire human race is such that we're kind of living in the future, but with a lot of the braces and the belts of the past, right? And so what I mean by that is the notion of a nation state, the notion that this determines so much of where we can go as human beings and what our rights are and what taxes we have to pay, etc. That notion is very different to what we're currently living in this kind of borderless society that's been enabled through the internet. Historically, we didn't have much communication transfer. Only in the last 2-3 decades has there been an explosion of information across the internet. And so right now, when I grew up in Kenya, I had a very Kenyan specific upbringing.
What does that mean?
So I'll give you an example. There wasn't a lot of materialism in Kenya. It was a very poor nation. We didn't have tons of toys or tons of options in the grocery stores and things of that nature. Kids in America, and it's just a very different kind of narrative that was there in Kenya, a very different narrative to the one in the United States when I was growing up. Now, the narrative for a lot of the kids around the world is what they're seeing on social media, and a lot of the kids, unfortunately, in my view, are getting onto social media quite early. But the point is that there's a narrative that's global because of this intercommunication that we have. And so the reason I bring that up is that we're living in a global village. And that global village, I don't think it makes any sense for the future to have a world currency that is under the power of a particular subset of humanity in a particular country. So I think the next global currency will be that. It will be a global currency outside of the purview of just a subset of humanity. And I think could it be gold? I don't think we're going back to the gold standard. And so I asked myself, well, what else is it? I think fiat currency is on the decline. And so I think Bitcoin has a very big chance of being that. But I think whether it's Bitcoin or not, it's going to be based on cryptography. So I think it will be some type of a crypto asset. It may have not existed, or it may not have been invented yet. I don't know. Right? But I do think that we're moving to this world where we have a currency for the world, for humanity as a whole. The economists that are watching this will start to say, what is this guy talking about? We need to have different currencies so they can devalue one currency against another, boost their exports and things of that nature. But I think it comes down to identity. We don't talk about California seceding and having its own currency so that it can boost export if it's not doing as well, versus the other parts of the United States. So I think this idea of identity and money goes hand in hand. And I think more and more we're identifying as a human race, and we're going to go through these challenges that we have with identity. But ultimately, I think we're moving towards just realizing that we're one human family, and we'll need a currency to go with that.
There were discussions about whether certain countries should be a part of EU, right? Because your economy sucks and mine is strong. And if you expand that to a global scale, powerful countries like the US might be like, hey, You are too small of a country, and I don't want to be using the same currency as yours.
I think that's what we're seeing right now. The reason I brought up my example before is that right now we have the euro. Remember, about 10 years ago, 13 years ago, when there was the euro debt crisis, a lot of the people in Europe were saying, listen, Greece has a lot of the troubles. They should go back to the Greek drachma. They should not have the euro so that they can devalue their currency and they can kind of reset. It doesn't make sense for them to have such a strong currency like the euro, like the rest of us, and particularly Germany. But again, that's comes down to identity. And so that's why I mean that humanity is kind of this adolescent phase, and we're finally heading towards maturity. But if you use that analogy of adolescence into maturity as human beings, we're going to have a whole bunch of pimples and just ugliness that's going to come, and like trying to figure out who we are as human beings, and youth going into adulthood. I see maturity of the human race at a stage where we recognize the oneness of the human race, regardless of what particular piece of dirt we're born on. But there are going to be some challenges along the way, because of the vested interests that we talked a little bit earlier about.
It sounds like you're very optimistic.
Yes, so it's definitely true, but I don't think it's just a dream of like kind of world peace and world unity. I think it's inevitable. I think it will have to happen. And the reason I say that is the last, say, 15, 16 years of my life was spent in South Africa. And South Africa, up until 1994, was an apartheid nation, completely segregated by race. Now, of course, that's totally unacceptable. The country is not segregated by race anymore, from a legal perspective. Obviously, from a social perspective, there's a lot of progress. Let's just take a look at this. Like right now, we've got yourself, a wonderful woman who is interviewing me, a man. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, this would be unthinkable because the status of women's society was not there. Like women were oppressed in society. And we've still got, I believe, a long way to go with the equality of men and women in society. But we've come a long way where we were 100, 200 years ago. Remember, just over 100 years ago, women in the United States didn't even have the right to vote. So the point is, when you look at that perspective, then you say, okay, we've made a lot of progress. And does it make sense that we're so divided as a human race? Does it make sense that because I have a United States passport, because I was born in California, that I have all these rights, whereas a kid that was born the same day as me, but was born a few kilometers south in Mexico, doesn't have these rights because they were born in a different plot of land? These things don't really make sense to me. I'm not only optimistic, I think it's inevitable, but the progress to get there and the process to get there and the path to get there, I think is not going to be smooth, but we will get there.
Talking about US and Mexico, does that mean you believe in the future there will be one government in charge of the whole world?
If you look at the history of our world again, we've come from those family units moved and became tribal units that used to feud. Those tribal units then became city-states that used to feud. Those city-states then became nation-states, which was in about the 1600s, which is where we currently are right now. So the next logical evolution and the way I see the world going is that we are going to be moving towards a world federation of nations, where yes, we'll have our own cultures, we'll have different languages, etc. But I think there'll be a world auxiliary language. I think there'll be a world auxiliary economic system and currency system that will facilitate trade between us. And yes, I do believe that the next stage of governance for the human race is going to be world governance, where the interests and the rights of humanity as a whole will be safeguarded. I think we'll have to go through quite a lot of change because our current governance systems are flawed in many ways. So I think we're going to be moving to new types of governance systems. But I do believe that ultimately we're going to have a world legislature, world judiciary, and I think we're going to have a world executive force. There's a grand vision there, but I think it's definitely coming.
I remember a few years ago, people seemed a lot more welcoming, and I think this was pre-COVID, and it seemed like globalization was inevitable. But now it seems like the world has this strange mentality of us versus them. Why do you think that is?
So I think transition comes with a lot of difficulty. Over the last few years, humanity has almost gotten to a stage where we've forgotten how to get along with people that had different views to ourselves. And we have these echo chambers, and it's actually started to divide families. In the United States, Or even COVID. COVID was dividing friends and families because of masks, as an example. Like, oh, I can't believe, or vaccines. Right now with political parties, like, are you part of that political party and not this political party? We can't even talk to you. I'll get a little bit philosophical with you, Bonnie. Ultimately, this world is based on unity, and it is based on love. And what I mean by that is, even if you go all the way down to the molecular level, what keeps this world together is the attraction between different parts of an atom. So at a physical level is attraction. At a societal level, I think what keeps us together is love, I think, and unity. And when love and unity is severed, then we start to have big problems. And I think right now we're at a stage where people are going through a kind of transition, and they're realizing, oh, actually, I don't know if I like this, and I'm not so familiar with it, I'm not used to it. So let me try to go back and protect my rights and my people. And so they put up barriers and tariffs and all sorts of kind of divisions. But I think that we'll see that we are much weaker as society when we're divided than when we're united. Our own lives, we have crises and victories in our process of life. And society is no different. And so I think we're going to go through these crises and victories, and that we'll have some crises, but then we'll realize this, and that was a bad idea, and so let's move in a different direction. But if you zoom out, this concept of unity is the prevailing concept of human society, right? You really scientifically cannot dispute that. You know, I'm a Baha'i, which is a lot of my kind of belief systems come from the Baha'i faith. But if you've read *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, he's obviously talking about the evolution of the world from a very atheistic and kind of non-spiritual dimension. Coming from both of these kind of spiritual and a non-spiritual perspective, the facts are kind of in tandem and synchronous, which is that we're moving to a more unified society ultimately. I think with anything there are challenges, but there is no doubt in my mind, if you just take a step back and look at the facts of society and where we are in the world, that we're moving more and more towards a more unified world, and I think the world will be better for it.
Can you tell us more about Baha'i?
So the Baha'i faith is a world religion that started about 180-ish years ago. So it's a very young world religion. And its main point is that of unity. It talks about the unity of the human race. It talks about the unity of religion. It talks about the unity of the divine, whatever you want to call that unknowable essence, right? We have lots of different words, God or Jehovah or Allah or whatever background you come from. And I think that's really based on the limitations that we place in our own language. If you take a step back and you kind of think about who are we and what are we doing over here, what can make sense of our reality, the Baha'i faith has a very beautiful views of where we're going as humanity. And a lot of the things that I've shared with you today are based on my understanding of what the Baha'i vision is for where we're going as a world. Its number one objective is the establishment of peace and unity in the world. And it basically says that for humanity to reach the next stage of its rightful evolution, we need to become a united community, a global community. We need to set aside our differences and prejudices that have plagued us for the history of our evolution. And it really is a beautiful message and a rekindling of the messages of all the previous divine teachings of love. It talks about the fact that if you have a religious belief that is not backed by science, then it's probably superstitious. And if you have science that doesn't have the guidance of religion, then it can be very misguided as well. So there's a lot of beautiful kind of belief systems within the Baha'i faith, and it's the single most beautiful prism of interpreting reality that I've ever come across. So I encourage listeners to look into it, read about it, and decide for themselves.
I went through all of your interviews online, and I remember very vividly that you talk about there is this one truth, and that even white lies are not acceptable. And this is very different from what I believe, and I'd like to know what you think. So I believe that people grow up very differently, and everyone is from different families, different financial backgrounds, different cultures. So people look at the world very differently, and it's all perspective. So help me understand here. How do you define what is the truth?
When I talk about truth, so I really do believe that truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues, right? That without truthfulness, it's very difficult to have any virtuous society. When I talk about truth, there's an objective reality of what happened. Different people may have different perspectives, but I think what we're seeing in the world right now is this kind of concept of relativism, which kind of everything goes, and your perspective and your perception of reality, whatever it is fine. I don't really share that. I do believe that there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. And I think as society, we believe that as well, right? We've come to believe that, going and killing somebody is not okay, right? It's called murder and you can be put behind bars, etc. So, if you make it very extreme, then there are certain things that we could probably agree on. In my spare time, I teach children's classes. I was talking to this mother of a 3 or 4 year old child, and I was explaining to her how we run these groups and how it's really important to bring up the next generation to really understand what these virtues are so that we can make the world a better place. And she looked at me and she said, "That sounds great. I'm really confused because the world has become such a crazy place. And I don't know whether I should teach my kids that or whether I should teach my child to be clever." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she said, "We're living in a dog eat dog world. And so maybe I just need to teach my kid to survive. And what that means is maybe lie to get ahead or stab someone in the back to, get their position." And I thought that's a really sad state of affairs, because that's kind of where we came from, in the origins of humanity, where we were all kind of for our own needs, fighting for ourselves. There's no rule of law. But as society, we've kind of evolved to realize that, rule of law is actually good, so long as there's justice. And you can imagine that if the next generation of people were taught what she was thinking about teaching her children, we would be heading into a world that's even worse than what it is right now in many ways. So coming back to your question about what is truth, there are spiritual conceptions of what truth is, but I think that gets too philosophical. But when I talk about truth and being truthful, what I mean is that if I talk to my finance manager and I said, "What is this number?" I expect to know the reality behind that number and not some made up story about what didn't happen. Because if I don't know the truth, then I can't take care of my customer funds, etc. So that's the type of truth that I'm saying it needs to be representative of reality.
But I feel like, okay, in crypto, people promote this mentality of don't trust, verify. And because people were traumatized by a lot of events that happened in 2022, for example, Luna, FTX, and a lot of numbers in crypto are manipulated. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of these examples. What is your take on this?
So the don't trust, verify is, I think there's a lot of health in that. Like where you can verify, you should verify. And that's coming from the context of a world where our trusted institutions are not so trustworthy anymore, right? Whether those trusted institutions are political parties or corporations or religious institutions or any other social institution that's meant to serve people, but is actually not doing that, but looking at their own interests. And so in that context, of course, it makes sense to say, listen, don't trust. People are not behaving as they should be doing, kind of with a loving mentality of how can I serve humanity? And as a result, then I need to verify because I don't know who I can trust. And I think that's true. Like we all have to do that. The fact of the matter is, economically speaking, we cannot all verify everything all the time. It's just not possible. Like I cannot verify every time I go into a restaurant that the food is good, that it's, if they say it's organic, it's actually organic. For me to go and interview someone and try to do the testing, etc., before I have every meal, or it's just not possible, right? Or even to verify that there's no poison in my food, or to verify that the plane that I'm just getting onto has been properly serviced. It's very difficult to verify these things. So if I had to verify everything without trusting anyone, I would be relegated to living a hermit lifestyle where I would have no interaction with anybody else in the world, right? I would have to make my own food. I would have to have zero trust. And that's just not who we are as a social species. So I understand that for sure, particularly in the context, and you said in crypto, there's a lot of nonsense hands in crypto. There's a lot of people that are just in crypto for the wrong reasons, in my opinion, which they're just trying to get rich. They're trying to screw other people, excuse my language, and steal. But we can do better. And I think we need more people to kind of stand up to that and to speak up to that and say, listen, actually, That behavior is not good for society. Let us work together, and where we can serve people, and where we serve people also is not a bad economic outcome. You can make money by serving people well. People like that. People will come to your platform. Don't trust, verify. Yes, that's a good attitude where it's possible, but it's just practically not possible to lead a full human life without trusting people. Just it's not possible.
What was your journey into crypto like? Because I feel like you have this very beautiful view of the world, and I want to know if that has anything to do with you getting into crypto.
It actually does. I have a very beautiful friend called Adam, and he was in the crypto space, and he had a startup, chain.com, in 2014. I had heard about crypto before that, I think probably 2012, 2013, I can't remember exactly the date. I'd heard about Bitcoin. I didn't know what it was. The price had gone up like crazy and it crashed, and I felt this is a scam and I don't know what this is, and forget about it. And when the price went down, I felt vindicated. And then when I heard he was in crypto, he's also a Baha'i. And I called him up and I said, Adam, what are you doing with your life? This is beneath you. You should be doing things that are, more worthy, and we should be, trying to serve our fellow brothers and sisters around the world. And he said, Farzam, I think you don't understand what crypto is or what Bitcoin is and what blockchain is. So let me explain a few things to you. And so he did. And my mind was blown. Really, just the concept of just things that I didn't even understand about our current monetary system. And I think that's also one of the problems that is a barrier to people understanding crypto, is they don't understand money. Forget about crypto, they just don't understand money. And so they can't understand why crypto and why Bitcoin is such an important concept, because they don't understand what the defaults and the deficiencies of money, what they are. Once I talked to him, I kind of started thinking about it a lot. I was working at a bank at the time, started talking to people at the bank. Ultimately, I became the blockchain lead at the bank for a couple of years. We built some wonderful stuff in the bank. We actually built an exchange in the bank, but they didn't want to launch it because it was still very early.
Yeah.
And so that's when my co-founders and I left to start VALR. And here we are 6.5 years later, really just trying to make the world a better place, trying to help build a financial system that recognizes the oneness of the human race, and trying to do our best to serve our brothers and sisters around the world.
Okay, so this part of the world, the northeast part of Asia, are relatively stable, right? We have a fairly strong economy. Of course, people might argue that, oh, our real estate prices are so high and that young people are losing hope. They can't afford a house. This is all true and it's really bad. But I think there are a lot of places in the world with bigger problems. And what are some injustices in the financial system that you've seen people dealing with right now?
Absolutely. The first time I had a bank account was in the United States. I grew up my first 18 years in Kenya. I didn't have a bank account at that time after a gap year, but I moved to California to start my university education. And that was the first time I had a bank account. And I opened my bank account and my banking was free. I didn't have to pay any fees. It was a pretty low cost financial experience for me. Then I went to South Africa, and a much poorer country, obviously. Every single bank account, you had to pay at least $5 or $10 a month to just have a bank account, let alone transact on that bank account, right? Because there are more fees with transactions as well. I remember thinking, gosh, I'm giving my funds to the bank so that the bank can use my funds to lend out and make money on those funds. And I'm paying the bank for the privilege of them using my money to make money from me.
Yeah.
So it was very perverse. I thought it was very perverse. So that was one area where I thought to myself, gosh, this seems a little bit strange. It has started to change a little bit in South Africa. Yeah, so talking about injustices, the fact that in Africa, when you send money from South Africa to Zimbabwe, there's a big remittance corridor. A lot of Zimbabweans are living in South Africa, they're sending money back. Pretty much the standard fee that people are paying for that privilege is 10%.
Wow.
Right? So you
Crazy.
10%. And that's actually not a bad deal when it comes to many other remittance corridors, right? You can look up the stats, but then oftentimes 18% or 20%. I think there's a tremendous amount of injustice there, where you have the intermediaries that are making a lot of money off the back of a lot of poor people around the world. And I think that there needs to be a better way. So that's just one example of the injustice. Another injustice of our current system, I think, is inflation. The inflation hits the poor the most. It's kind of part and parcel of our current system, where inflation is embedded into our economic structures, into the mandates of central banks. I think there's a lot of injustice there. I often ask myself, why do we even have inflation? Why is the inflation target 2%, 6%, depending on where you are in the world? Why isn't it 1% or 0 or negative? These are just a couple of obvious cases of injustice, but there are many other cases of injustice around the world. We can talk about property rights. We can talk about the fact that we have problems with property rights across Africa and different parts of the world, where it's very difficult to start building wealth for yourself if you can't even own the place that you're trying to live or have any pathways to owning that. Or if you do own the place that you live, but it's very difficult to prove that you own it, and so you can't get credit against the asset that you have to try to build more wealth. And so there's just a lot of things that are wrong with our financial system and society at large. I don't have all the answers to them, obviously, but we're just trying to do our best.
I want to know, okay, do you think central banks should not exist? Because they're also helping the society by, providing public transportation, healthcare. I don't know. Are they doing enough?
Well, I don't think all central bankers are evil. Let me put it that way, right? I think there are many central bankers that are trying to do their best. They're trying to help society. They're trying to progress society. But we're in a system that has a lot of flaws. And when you're part of that system, it's very difficult to change it from within. I'll give you one small example. In South Africa and other places of Africa, there's a lot of poverty. If you're driving from one place to another, you're going to pass a lot of people that haven't eaten for the last 18 hours, 24 hours, or whatever it is, right? Or who are sleeping, who don't have shelter, right? Or who are homeless. Our progeny and our children, when they look back at us, they might look at Farzam and they're like, Farzam, you used to drive from your home, the comfort of your home, to the bank where you were working at previously, and you used to pass poor people. And you knew they were poor because they were literally asking for money. You would just pass them and you would go to your work. How could you continue with your luxurious lifestyle when you knew another human being didn't even have enough to eat? Yet you just passed them and listening to your music or your radio. And how primitive of a society was that, where we didn't take care of our own? The reason I share that is that someone could say that, oh, Farzam, you're evil. Like, looking back in this, how could you not stop and help another human being? Right? You had the resources, but our system is such that it's overwhelming. Like I can't single-handedly go and solve poverty, right? Or world poverty. And so in the same way, I think we are in systems, like the central bankers are in a particular system that I think is very flawed, that I think needs to change fundamentally. But I don't think many of them are purposefully doing things that are evil. So I think our systems need to change. Right? But there are many people that are stuck in the system that are doing their very best, but the system is flawed, not necessarily the people. I really question a lot when a lot of the colleagues in the crypto space speak about things like that, or when they say, oh, bankers are bad. No, bankers are not bad. Right? Some bankers may be bad, but there are a lot of people in crypto that are bad as well. So
talking about system, there is this Bitcoin premium in Africa. And I think some parts of the world do not understand why. And they're like, oh, it's such a great arbitrage opportunity and you can just easily make a quick buck, right? But it's actually not as simple as it sounds.
in South Africa, there's a structural arbitrage. And what that means is there's capital controls. And what that means is that it's very difficult to get your money out of South Africa sometimes because of various regulations. Most of the world's mining is not done in South Africa. When I say mining, I'm talking about Bitcoin mining. There's a lot of other mining that goes on in South Africa, but I'm talking about Bitcoin mining right now as an example. And for crypto to be able to be brought into the country, people need to use their exchange control allowances, their capital control allowances, to be able to buy Bitcoin and then bring it into the country and sell it in the country. But there's a much higher demand than the amount that's being sold in the country because of a shortage of supply. And so typically you have the price of Bitcoin ranging between 1.5% to 2% higher in South Africa than it does on international markets. Like economists and they're educated people, they say, but we know that arbitrages get arbitraged down to zero. And yes, that's what the textbook says, but the textbook doesn't talk to you about the fact that there's an exchange control regulation that limits the flow of money. And so that arbitrage exists because of a structural challenge with supply and demand dynamics in the cryptocurrency markets within South Africa. Something similar exists within Korea, something similar exists within Brazil. Pretty much whenever you have a particular economic system that has some inhibitions of free capital flowing, then you result in some type of an anomaly of supply and demand that results in either a premium or a discount to the price of crypto or other type of financial assets. So that's why it exists. Now, it's not easy to take advantage of it necessarily, because the way to take advantage of it is generally by taking money out of that system, buying and then selling it back into that system. But if you're from outside of that system and you want to take advantage of it, then you have to buy, take it out of the system, or then sell into the system, and then take it out again to repatriate your profits. But the whole point is that you cannot repatriate your profits in many circumstances, which is why the arbitrage exists. So there's some peculiarities to it. Some people have figured out how to take some advantage of it, but it's not something that anybody can just come and take advantage of it, because then the textbooks would be right and it would go down to zero. But it stays around 1.5% to 2%.
Is it correct to say that, let's say if I want to do this arbitrage, and I go and sell my Bitcoin, and I will hold local currency, right? But it is very hard for me to change that back to US at the same rate, or like at the official rate.
That's right. Or even that you may not be able to take it out of the country, or at any rate, right? And that's where the challenge comes in, because you've got the local currency, but then if you don't have the right approvals, then you may not be able to take it out. So that's where the challenge comes in.
So it would make sense for the local people to do it, would it? Because I will.
It does. We used to have a product at VALR where we did this for our customers, and because there's an arbitrage by definition means kind of risk-free profit, right? So you're not taking on risk because there's an option to buy and sell in different markets at different prices to kind of lock in a profit. And so we had to spend a lot of time with our own product to make it not look like it was a scam, because it's like you click this button and we do 3 trades and then you end up with a profit instantaneously, and it actually looks like this is not possible. So if you don't understand the dynamics of how it actually happens, then you'd be saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And it's true, there's limits to that. So you can't keep doing that, because that's the whole point. You've got an allowance, and then once you hit that allowance, it stops. But it's a very strange concept if you're not familiar with it, about, wait, how does that work and how do you just create money? And but arbitrage is a normal concept in financial markets when there's a divergence of prices in 2 different markets.
Do you still have that product? Because I would love to.
We don't. Yeah, we don't. We used to. We don't. The reason we don't have it is that one of our banking partners didn't fully understand it, and they said, listen, we don't know what this is about and we don't like it. So, for you to continue having your banking relationship with us, you need to not offer this product anymore. So we try to explain to them, say, this is not, there's nothing untoward whatsoever here. In fact, we're helping people a lot because there's a structural inefficiency in our markets, and we're actually helping to monetize that for customers where they can do well, but they didn't seem to understand it. And so for the sake of holding on to our banking relationship, we discontinued the product.
Oh no, it's so different. Like, it's not like any product you've heard on any exchanges. So that
Yeah,
is
it's true.
very
It's
special.
true.
We talked about street rate, right? Who decide what the rate should be? Like, how do people just agree on a rate?
How do we determine what the rate is? So ultimately, it comes down to buyers and sellers, right? There are people that, like, let's talk about Bitcoin. There are people that have Bitcoin and want to sell it. There are people that have, say, dollars or rands, and they want to buy Bitcoin. And so in a market, you have buyers and sellers in a free market that can come together and basically have a bidding process to see where does the rate kind of land. And it's through, and if you go onto our exchange or any other exchange, you can literally see the order book of all the people wanting to buy and what the price they want to buy, and the people that are wanting to sell and what price they want to sell. and it moves, and where they cross is where the right rate is, right? But to your point, in some economies, and depending on what asset we're talking about, there are particular vested interests that do not want a free floating exchange rate, right? With just pure buyers and sellers just, with their free will coming and buying or selling. And so they will try to effectively put an artificial price on, let's say, a currency. And we see this in actually many African nations. There's oftentimes a particular official rate and then the street rate. But what you'll see over time is that because it's not based on the free market, it's very, very difficult to sustain that over time because there's an imbalance. And so over time, what you'll see is that you'll see a very big jump in an exchange rate because they really try to keep it at that rate for a very, very long time. And then ultimately it jumped up and then it got devalued or something like that. And so what we were just talking about, arbitrage, is where people can see the price of one product, but in different markets, that's different. They'll buy where it's low, they'll sell where it's high. By buying where it's low, they push up the price. By selling where it's high, they pull down the price. And by doing that, they try to bring into equilibrium the price of an asset. And so we're seeing multiples of like tons and tons of market participants all around the world in different markets for one particular asset like Bitcoin, trying to figure out what the price is and where there are inefficiencies in the market. And many companies have explicit arbitrage strategies. This is how they make money, to kind of bring efficiencies into the market, to buy where it's low, to sell where it's high. And those arbitrageurs actually perform a great service to financial markets because they bring prices in line. So let me say something that's, again, probably not very consistent with a lot of the crypto community. There's this saying that, Bitcoin fixes it. And people, and they say it tongue in cheek a lot of the time, but a lot of people believe that, if we just get onto a Bitcoin standard, then the problems of the world will become much better. I think that's a very, very simplistic view of the complexities of humanity. And I view Bitcoin as a tool. I think, is it a better instrument? I do think so, right? And can it serve humanity in many ways? I do think so. But in and of itself, if we don't change anything else about society, about how we govern ourselves, about how we look at justice, about how we try to solve our difficulties around the world, Bitcoin itself is just a tool. So there's a lot of things that we need to do to improve the world, to progress civilization, to improve injustices or right injustices. I'm hopeful that I can use the few days and years that I have on this earth to try to make the world a better place for my children and their children. I think our priorities are wrong. Many of us are just trying to fill our bank accounts to get onto these lists and to get the richest, who's the richest person in the world. And every day we get one day closer to the day that we're leaving all of that behind, regardless of your belief system. So we're going to leave all these things behind, but I think there's just an overemphasis on material wealth in our world right now, at the expense of a lot of justices that we could have. So anyway, I do think some of our focuses or foci are not quite right in society. And don't get me wrong, money is important. Wealth is important, right? We need, like with physical wealth, you can do things. There's a lot that you can do to change it. I think my main point is that the acquisition of wealth has become the objective itself rather than a means to an end. So wealth is great, but the question is, what are you doing with that wealth? If you're just trying to gather wealth just to show people how much of it you have, that's unworthy to me of a human being. If you're trying to gain wealth so that you can actually deploy that capital to improving people's lives, taking care of people that are sick, educating children in the community, building institutions that serve humanity, wonderful. Go and get more and more wealth. So to your point, I think there's this wrong image, like either money is good or bad. No. I think money is great, but I think it depends on what you're doing with it and how you view it. And if it's just, as I said, the end in itself, if money is the end in itself, no, it needs to be a means to an end. It's a vehicle, it's a tool.
Do you think for places where US dollar is harder to get, Bitcoin prices are more volatile?
So I think the price in dollars, overall kind of stays consistent in dollar terms around the world. But I think what changes a lot is when you doing the price in the local currency. And because effectively what you get when you talk, let's say take the Rand, the Bitcoin price in terms of Rands is effectively the combination of the Bitcoin price in terms of dollars and the dollar price in terms of Rand. And you combine those together, then you get the Rand price and the Bitcoin price in terms of Rand. So you get a very volatile crypto asset, which is Bitcoin priced in dollars. You add to that quite a volatile FX pair, which is dollar Rand, and you put that together into the price of Bitcoin Rand. And that's where you have much more volatility than just Bitcoin dollars. That's because also the currencies themselves are very volatile. But that speaks to more the asset that the Bitcoin is being priced in rather than Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin's volatility is it is what it is. But when you price it in a more volatile asset, then the volatility of Bitcoin in terms of dollars gets accentuated even further.
Is Bitcoin more widely adopted in Africa versus other continents? I want to know if things work differently in emerging markets, right? Do companies actually use USDT to trade, buy things?
We have customers on VALR who have told me directly that they buy either USDT or USDC, but really to hedge against the devaluation of the local currency. Right? So they would buy some stablecoin, dollar stablecoin, hold it on VALR until the time that they needed the funds again. Then they sold it on VALR and then took the proceeds out in rands, as an example. So that definitely is there for a very legitimate reason. We have within Africa, I think in different corridors across the continent, a lot of people use stable coins for remittances. Much easier than figuring out kind of FX flows oftentimes, although mobile money is becoming more and more prevalent within Africa, but still you're going between different currencies. So you probably heard of M-Pesa in Kenya, which is, the ability to load your effectively telephone number with a certain balance of Kenyan shillings, and then to send those Kenyan shillings to another mobile telephone number. So that's worked very well. It's been obviously a big kind of case study for the world over the last 15 years or so about how well mobile money worked in Kenya. It hasn't really scaled to many other countries. And also when you look at mobile money in different countries in Africa, you have mobile money denominated in the local currency. So it's not very easy, for example, to take your Kenyan shillings in Kenya that's on your M-Pesa account and send it to somebody in South Africa to be received in rands via mobile money. You got to go from your Kenyan shillings, somehow get it to the rand. Oftentimes it goes to the US dollar, and there is costs associated with all of that. So I think many people in Africa are looking at stable coins as a way of just being able to transact, holding a much more stable kind of asset that's backed by the US dollar and being able to transfer peer-to-peer oftentimes without going through a lot of intermediaries that cost them, money at every intersection, right? Of the transaction. There's not just anecdotal evidence. We've seen it on the platform where people are buying, as I mentioned, stable coins for the protection of their own value. I think more and more people are realizing that our current financial system is expensive and our current financial system is inefficient. And crypto promises to bring down costs, and it promises to bring down the delays of sending value from one person to another or one institution to another institution. There's a lot of promise that's nothing to do with any illicit activity from the crypto space.
A lot of VALR's trading volume is from institutions. Is that correct?
That's right. That is correct.
When you say volume, is it more like fiat to USDT, or are they trading other tokens?
So we have about 90 different tokens, probably close to maybe 100 now on VALR. Some of our biggest pairs are our RAND-denominated pairs, but we also offer Bitcoin USDT, Bitcoin USDC pairs. We offer Solana. Pretty much anything you'd expect from a big global exchange. We're the largest trading venue in the world across all global exchanges of cryptocurrency trading in terms of RAND.
Wow.
Right? So, for example, Binance does exist in South Africa. There are RAND pairs, but we are probably 10x or more larger than Binance in terms of the trading volume of RAND pairs. And so that's Bitcoin Rand, that's USDT Rand, etc. But we're growing more and more in the non-rand pairs as well. So with our Bitcoin USDT, as I mentioned, Bitcoin USDC or other crypto to crypto, or ETH in terms of stable coins as well. And then also we've launched recently our perpetual futures, and that's been growing very, very quickly as well. So our volume has been growing there. So I think while we come from Africa, our aspiration is really to serve the world. And as I mentioned earlier, sitting in Hong Kong right now, we're visiting some of our customers over here, some of our partners, also trying to make new partners in this part of the world. When I say in this part here, and we're going to Singapore as well. We're the largest in Africa, but our aspirations are much larger to serve the globe.
Well, I see Africa as this land of so much opportunity. And why do you want to expand to Asia? We've got a lot of big players here already.
A lot of our customers actually are from East Asia. We have a lot of also corporations, trading firms from East Asia that are on VALR. And so it's a corridor that I think is going to become more and more relevant in the future, particularly with trade that happens between Africa and Asia. So to your point, there are some great companies, great platforms within Asia. They don't offer everything we have to offer. And also I think that we can do certain things better than they can do. One of the things that it's very difficult to know what goes on behind the scenes of any other crypto exchange. Obviously, I am behind the scenes for VALR as one of the co-founders and the CEO. So I know that we're doing things properly. It doesn't mean that there are no risks with VALR, right? There's always security risk for any cryptocurrency exchange, whether you're Coinbase, Binance, OKX, or anything. And that exists with VALR too. So it's not to say that there's no risk. Risk always exists. I do know that at VALR, we've got a very strong values-based approach to how we operate. There are lines you just never ever cross. And some of those lines have been crossed by other competitors in the past that no longer exist. I remember telling the team, this is before FTX went down, I said, guys, we don't know what the future crypto landscape will look like. All we can do is keep serving people, keep doing the right thing, keep building. For all we know, next year FTX or Binance won't be around. Those are the top two at the time. Lo and behold, the following year, FTX was not around, as an example, right? Going back to our earlier part of the conversation, lack of integrity of many operators in our space, right? And what we want to really bring is really strong integrity, saying, listen, come and trust us. Do your verification to the extent that you can, that we talked about, absolutely. And if you don't like what you see, take your money elsewhere, no problem whatsoever. But I think we offer something to our customers that have come to know us, which is trust is really priceless, right? And trustworthiness is really priceless. So we're here just to kind of provide a platform that we believe is very trustworthy. And we offer it to our guests around the world. If they want to come to us, great. If they don't, we're also happy with that. But we're the only crypto trading platform in the world that offers perpetual futures denominated in rands. That's just one example. And a lot of traders in the crypto space like a lot of volatility. And so we have perpetual futures that are denominated in rand, which means you get the volatility of Bitcoin dollar price and you get the volatility of the dollar rand price in one instrument. So people that want volatility, they can come and trade that on VALR, right? We also have a fantastic cross-margin engine, which means you can come and bring you can get credit, right? If you're trading on margin on VALR, you can bring basically collateral in terms of USDC or USDT, and then you can trade a Bitcoin Rand pair, but with collateral that has nothing to do with that pair. Some other platforms do offer that, but we're doing it in a very seamless way. So our idea and our objective is to really make the trading experience a very simple one for customers across the world. We believe that we're doing that better than many platforms that exist out there. So just the experience and some of the product and some of the pairs are some that don't exist on all platforms in the world, and some that only exist on VALR.
Do you think that will be the selling point for people in Asia to try out the platform?
I think so. It just depends on who you are. Like if you're a retail customer in Asia that you want to buy some crypto, then a Bitcoin Rand pair is not necessarily something that you want to be trading. If you are an Asian trading firm that's trying to look for instruments around the world that have different correlations to pairs that they're trading, on their other exchanges, it's a fantastic place to come to, right? Which is why I believe we have a lot of customers from different parts of the world that still come and trade on VALR, right? And not just the Bitcoin dollar pairs, but Bitcoin Rand pairs and other pairs that we all have to offer. I really always want to do what's best for people. And so while I think there are a lot of people in the crypto space that say, oh, crypto is the future, everybody should get into crypto right now, I don't say that. I think crypto, particularly when you come from a continent where there's a lot of poverty and when crypto is so volatile, I explicitly say on my interviews on the radio that crypto is not for everybody at the moment, right? If you're living hand to mouth and you are trying to save for your rent next month, I don't think you should necessarily be putting that money into crypto because it could half between now and the time you need to pay your rent. So in the same kind of vein, I wouldn't say that what our product is there for everybody in Asia. We have products, the stuff that people are trading, Bitcoin Rand, Bitcoin dollar, and perpetuals. We have that stuff, and that we do compete for things that they want. But not all of these products that I'm talking about would be relevant to all customers around the world. So it just depends on your needs and whether it matches those needs or not.
That is interesting because a lot of people in crypto would say, by the way, when I say crypto, I mean Bitcoin. People would say Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation, so that if you're poor, you should get in early.
Yeah. So, if you talk to many people, that narrative is right over a period of about 4 years. In the long run, Bitcoin acts as a very nice hedge against inflation. In the short run, it's very, very volatile. And you could actually lose a lot of value in the short run. And so particularly for people that don't have the disposable income to put away for several years, but the money that they're earning needs to be paid off, the next day or the next week, that narrative, I think, is not consistent with people's reality on the ground. And so they don't have enough wealth to be able to wait for 4 years. So I think that narrative is if you have some money to put away for a few years and not look at it, great. But if you don't have that money, then you can't be kind of pitching that narrative to someone that's living, hand to mouth on a daily basis.
What is the growth story of VALR?
About 2 years ago in 2022,
Wow.
we raised $50 million from Pantera, Coinbase, GSR, Avon Ventures, which was the investing arm of Fidelity, one of the largest asset managers in the world. So that was a great privilege. It was a wonderful milestone for us at VALR. And just growth-wise, as I said, we've been around for 6.5 years. We have been growing consistently, actually, over that time. Even in the bear markets, actually, while a lot of people came down in a big way, we kind of plateaued. We didn't come down; we just kind of stayed consistent, and we're now picking up again with the recent movement in prices upwards. We've always been growing as a team. We are growing in jurisdictions. We're licensed in South Africa now. We've got an approval to operate crypto asset services in Poland. We have initial approval from Dubai, but there's a lot of luck that is also involved in these things. I think many founders are very quick to ascribe success to themselves and failure to the market or external elements, and I think that's not truthful. So I think we've also been very lucky. We've been in the right place at the right time. So long may that continue.
Yes, inshallah.
Inshallah, absolutely.
What are African retails like? Are they in crypto more for the transaction or the investment or gambling?
I think there's a big part that's speculative. I wouldn't say gambling because I think there's a real problem with the devaluation of local currency. So a lot of people say, listen, I've got this local currency, but I think I will speculate and buy some crypto with the aspiration and the hope that it retains its value better than the local currency. We have a lot of traders. I'm on a bunch of trading WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups, and there are a lot of people that are trading for a living, right? Retail traders that do that. A lot of charts, people that are looking at the charts and doing, technical analysis and things of that nature. People that are buying and holding. And then there are the traders that are trading. And then there are people that are also just trying to figure out what this whole asset class is. They're just dabbling. They'll come and buy, and they'll try to send it to another address and see what that experience looks like. Go onto a blockchain explorer and trying to say, oh my goodness, I just sent that from here to another crypto platform and I can see that on the internet, and oh wow, it's very, very transparent. And so it's a really cool thing. So I think there are different use cases. There are also some of our customers that are using it to pay for groceries. So at VALR, we have something called VALR Pay. That's free. You can pay any cell phone number, email address, or VALR Pay ID with any currency that you have on VALR. And we have integrations with some of the largest supermarkets in South Africa, where you can go and literally pay for your groceries with Bitcoin or with Rand or whatever else you want. And so there are people that do that as well. The predominant use case still is speculation. For crypto to have a more dominant role in payments and in ultimately being units of account to price things in, we're going to have to see much more stability. But I think that's down the line. I think we still, as humanity, need to figure out what this asset class is worth. You cannot price Bitcoin alone. Like, what's the price of Bitcoin? It has to be in reference to something else. It has to be in reference to either USD or Rand or another cryptocurrency or whatever it is. So right now, whatever you price Bitcoin in, it's very volatile.
Mm.
And particularly when you have economies that are priced in fiat currency, even though you have inflation, at least there's a little bit more kind of transparency into what your costs may be over the next month or two, because your suppliers are charging you or giving you a price for the next month or 30 days, whatever it may be. That's why I think for Bitcoin to become a little bit more prevalent in the world, I think we're going to have to see some crises in our traditional financial system. And then only once we've seen some crises and a transition will we start to see people start to price things in crypto rather than in a fiat currency. And again, right now, the US dollar is more stable than Bitcoin. But if you were living in Zimbabwe 15 years ago, the volatility of your local currency was way more volatile than what Bitcoin is today. And so there's a role for other monetary units to be used in that society. So I don't know exactly what it will look like, but I do believe that we're going to have quite a few financial crises in the next couple of decades. And I think coming out of those crises, we're going to see what role crypto and Bitcoin has to play for the world.
How big of a crisis do you think that has to be?
The US dollar cannot exist forever. And right now it is the reserve currency of the world. So if you go from a world where the US dollar exists and it's the dominant currency and it's the reserve asset, to a world where it doesn't exist anymore, that transition has to be tumultuous. I cannot see any other transition that's not tumultuous. I don't know what it would look like, but I do think that there will be some crises within my lifetime that will be very significant and that will kind of reset some of the financial equilibria that we think we have in society. I don't know what they look like. And by the way, I don't think that if you have crypto, that you're going to be, I'm going to be fine because everybody else is going through a crisis. No, I think it's going to be a crisis for the world and that we're going to have to work together to figure things out. Things are off tilt in many ways in our financial system and in our global society. And I think somehow they need to come back into some type of equilibrium. And I think that there will be some crises to do that. It's either going to be orderly, but I don't see, because of all the vested interests that we talked earlier, I don't see that happening, or it's going to be disorderly. And I think there'll be a big mess. But I do think that we have the capacity to fix it. And I think we will fix it. And I think we'll move to a better world after that.
When you say you don't think the US dollar will last forever, okay, we grew up using US dollar or whatever fiat that we're using, and it's very hard to imagine a world without US dollar. Why do you say it's going to come to an end?
If you went back to the Roman times and you talked to people about their coins and you said, we're going to live in a financial system in the future without these coins, people would say, what are you talking about? Like how is that even going to work? And then if you talk to people about a financial system where the money was not even physical, that 95% of our money is digital, that you cannot even see it, like they would really think that you're off your rocker. Like that doesn't make any sense. So that's obviously a couple of thousand years that we're talking about. The point that I'm trying to make is that change is inevitable. It really is inevitable. And we have a difficult time perceiving that as humans when you're in a particular society, in a particular paradigm. But when paradigm shifts come, they can change very, very quickly. So again, I'm not smart enough to understand exactly what that shift will look like, but I do know enough to know that shifts will happen. They're not always just small incremental shifts. They're oftentimes huge shifts,
That's sudden.
right? And that are sudden, that change the nature of power in the world, that change the nature of wealth in the world, that change the nature of wealth distribution in the world, that change the nature of health in the world. Bonnie, we're on the cusp of a lot of craziness in our world. Like, there are nuclear powers that are making threats to each other all the time right now, right? We've got economic crises around the world. We've got literally people bombing each other, literally humans bombing each other right now, which is crazy. And we see more and more like conflagration and difficulties. I don't think this just happens and we just keep going and then we're cool. I think that this is going to come to a head at some point, and there's going to be some big event. Again, I don't know what it looks like, but and again, I don't mean to scare people. I'm very optimistic about humanity, but I don't think that the trajectory that we're on as humanity is a sustainable one. And I think there'll be something that causes the limbs of humanity to quake, right? I don't know what that will be. I think there will be tremendous change. And I think oftentimes tremendous change hurts, but the transition from one era to another, oftentimes tremendous suffering for humanity. But we'll see what the future holds.
Bitcoin maxis will say Bitcoin can fix that, right? And to hedge against all these chaos, you need Bitcoin. Do you think that's true?
It has its role, but I don't think it fixes everything. As I've mentioned, our political parties are so divisive right now. Like if you just look at the US presidential election right now as an example, right? It's so acrimonious. Bitcoin doesn't fix everything. Bitcoin can contribute to a solution for an economic system in some way, but society is very nuanced. We have a lot of work to do with our social relations. We have a lot of work to do with our mental health. We have a lot of work to do with taking care of the elderly as our demographics change. We have a lot of work to do with solving challenges of disease and poverty and making sure that our environment is healthy and stuff like that. So it helps for sure, but it's a very simplistic view to say Bitcoin fixes everything. It's a tool, and it's a wonderful tool, don't get me wrong. But I don't think we can be so arrogant as to think that a monetary tool can solve all of the issues that we have as a multifaceted society. I think that's very simplistic and short-sighted.
I love that you have all these really deep thoughts, and it takes time to really communicate what you or VALR stand for. But you're in Asia right now for Token 2049 and all these other events. It's really hard to just sit down with someone and spend 2 hours with them to talk about all these hopes and dreams, right? Can you share with us some observation you have on VALR's reception in Asia?
So we've been actually very pleasantly surprised by our reception in Asia. We've got a lot of people that love us a lot in Asia who are welcoming us to Asia. I think it's testament to our team, or we've got a phenomenal team that's built a beautiful product that I think many Asians love. But we are still in our infancy with Asia. I think we've got a long way to go, and we've got a lot of work to do to tell the world and Asia about our product and our services and who we are and what our values are and what we're aiming to do and how well we want to serve people. And I think one of the things about Asia as well is there's a great level of service and a standard of service that is in many ways unparalleled around the world. And it's something that inspires us, and we're very excited to kind of contribute to that level of service that we see in other places in Asia. So I'm very excited to be here. I am very excited to have a product that can serve people in this part of the world. And I'm excited to get more and more Asians onto our platform and to serve them and for them to experiment to see how we can serve them better than whatever options that they currently have right now. But again, I always tell the team that if we're not the best at what we're trying to do, and we don't deserve to serve our customers if they have better options out there. Right.
Wow.
So really, we're trying to build the best product that we have so that we can serve people to the best of our ability and to the best of the ability that they have to receive a service.
Earlier, you said that in Asia, there is a great level of service or something along the line.
There is a wonderful, I feel, culture of service in East Asia. there is a level of humility that I
Oh,
often see in many cultures. There's a kind of oftentimes a culture of putting others forward, helping them. It's not as individualistic as, say, the West and the United States is. There's more a sense of community, I think, in many ways, more a sense of society, of societal obligation. But I think there is definitely a wonderful sense of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in certain Asian cultures, there is definitely a sense of social obligation that you need to do something to serve the society or the community that you're in, right? And I find that is oftentimes stronger than what I've seen in some other Western cultures.
do you think that aligns with Valor's value or what you stand for? Therefore, it would be an advantage.
Definitely. I definitely think that there is a resonance with our approach and a lot of the Asian culture. You know, we also try to be really humble and VALR. Right? I think that there's the humility is in short supply in the world. Again, Asia is such a complex place with so many different cultures as well. But do I think that there's a resonance between VALR and the Asian culture? Absolutely.
Anything exciting going on at Valor?
So there's a lot that's exciting at VALR, as always. We're building lots of new products and services. We are improving our current products and services. We have a lot of our customers that are API traders that are plugged directly into our application programming interface. So you have a lot of algorithmic traders. So we're always trying to improve the performance of our platform, reduce latencies. We have really a world-class API, which is why some of the sophisticated traders around the world are on VALR. And so we're always improving that. We are also improving our ability to get money on and off the platform in fiat currency. So right now, we have services in rand, in dollars, in euros, and we're going to be expanding that even more in the future. And then also a whole bunch of different yield products that we're going to be bringing to the market soon, right? We really, and maybe to get a little technical for some of the people that might be interested in this, but we look at finance and value across 5 pillars. So if you look at finance, I look at finance to say, when you have anything of value, you need that value to be stored, you need that value to be transferred, you need that value to be exchanged from one to another, you need to be able to provide value in loans, and you need the ability to protect value, either through insurance or derivatives or things of that nature. So really, if you look at financial services, pretty much they fit into those 5 pillars. And so what we're trying to do is strengthen what we offer in each of those 5 pillars so that we can have a really strong financial product for anybody around the world. And we're doing more and more to kind of deepen our products and services in each of those 5 pillars. So there's always lots on the go at VALR.
I saw that there is something called Solana Summer. What is it?
So Solana Summer, it's a celebration almost of Solana that's they've been doing for a number of years. And on VALR, we have Solana. There's a whole bunch of things that we're doing to get rewards into our customers' hands. There's activities to be done. There's basically just a festive season. We have a real sense of value sharing at VALR, where when we create value, we want to share it back with our customers. So Solana Summer is just one way in which we do that, which is a bunch of different things that are happening on the platform. You can come in and really celebrate the Solana ecosystem with us and earn a SOL and much more on Solana. So it's really an excuse to have a good time, to give value back to our customers, and it has different kind of permutations on the platform itself. But that's also one thing in the grander scheme of what our marketing team is doing with what's called the Global Treasure Hunt and a whole bunch of things to kind of get our customers to integrate with us, to have fun, to have different types of activities that they need to do that they can get rewarded for. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're just trying to get our engagement with our customers more and more interesting, more and more fun, and trying to gamify a lot of the things on the platform.
Do you have a Chinese version of the app coming?
We do. How did you know that, Bonnie? So we do have a Chinese version of the app that's coming. We've been working on that as well. And again, that's really just to expand our access to a larger part of the market. A lot of our customers in different parts of the world, obviously Chinese is a language that's spoken by many billions of people around the world. And so it's a way for us to kind of make the app feel more native with a product that would have otherwise perhaps felt more foreign. We have employees now in Asia. We have people that are working on the app that are Asian, that we want to make the app theirs. And so this is one of the ways in which we make an international global platform feel very local by bringing it to you in your own language.
A lot of retails in Hong Kong and China will be asking this question. Can I use VALR in Hong Kong or China?
So we are not allowed to solicit in many parts of the world. It depends on the different regulatory regimes in different parts of the world. There are certain places where you've got what's called the reverse solicitation regimes, where we are not allowed to come to a particular geography and advertise to tell people to come to us. But if people from a particular geography come to VALR and use our services, then there's no problem there. So in many of the Asian economies, we don't advertise actively. But if some of those Asian economies come to VALR and use our services, we welcome that, and that's legal and that's allowed.
The next question is for every crypto holder. Do you believe in the 4-year cycle, and can you give us a Bitcoin price prediction?
The way I like to look at it is by comparing it to something that we know, which is gold. Like gold is, depending on which kind of reports you look at, the price of gold altogether is probably between, or the value of all gold that exists right now in the world is anywhere between, let's say, 12 to 17 trillion US dollars. Anything that is digital, that has kind of gone on to replace its analog version, has not just gone to match the value of that analog version, but has gone and exceeded it by many orders of magnitude. And if you think about mail, like emails replacing the postal system, not completely replacing it, but the amount of emails that there are way more than there was ever post, right? Or the amount of music there's been and people listening to music when it's gone digital, or the amount of videos or documents that exist in the world, etc. So I do view Bitcoin as a kind of a gold 2.0. And I do think that Bitcoin will not go and only hit parity with gold, but I think it will surpass it. By my last calculations, if you looked at if the price of Bitcoin, or if the value of Bitcoin and the value of gold hit parity, then you're looking at a price of Bitcoin per coin of about 700,000 US dollars. And if you look at 700,000 US dollars that just hits parity with gold, I think ultimately we're going to hit higher than that, right? But again, this is also a story about the relative valuation of the US dollar versus Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is extremely low right now compared to what it will be in the future. I don't know. I suppose my price target over the next 5 to 10 years is probably, I would say, $700,000 per Bitcoin.
Wow.
I think that's going to be met relatively easily.
This is going to be in the highlight.
All right.
It sounds like you believe in the God candle or the Omega candle instead of the 4-year cycle, because within the 4-year cycle, it's more like having, steady growth and all that. But this is more like chaos theory.
I would say somewhere in between. I think there's going to be some big candles, obviously, but I think within the 4-year cycles, I think, we have seen historically that it kind of goes up and down, but it's an upward trajectory. And so I do view these cycles, and I think there will continue to be cycles, but I think the trajectory is upwards. I don't spend too much time thinking about the ups and the downs, like in any particular small moment of time. But I do think that the cycles will happen, the volatility will continue, but the trajectory will be upwards.
Do you believe in altcoins then? Because we talk about Bitcoin a lot.
I think a lot of the crypto assets that exist today will go to zero. I don't think there will be space in the future for all of these different coins. I think the whole point and my whole thesis is that the financial system of the world needs to get more simple. More simple, I'm talking about not the technology, like I'm not a technically inclined person, I'm an economist, but it works and it's simple from the perspective of a user experience. There will be a situation that is akin to what we saw with the dot-com era. But today, some of the most valuable assets in the world are those assets that were born in that era. And so I think in the future, many of the most valuable assets in the world will be assets that were born out of this Cambrian explosion of crypto assets, but I think many will die along the way, and that will be left with a few that are very, very valuable.
With that being said, do you think altcoin season will be coming this cycle? Because it feels like there are so many coins on the market and it's all diluted.
I do think that there will be an altcoin season. I think we're still in the early stages of the experimentation that is crypto at the moment. And remember, I talk a lot about Bitcoin right now because that's kind of what's the dominant asset right now within the crypto space. But I think, again, one has to have the humility to think, is it going to be Bitcoin? Is it going to be something else? Is it something that doesn't exist yet? I don't know. So just on the broader theory, I think that there is going to be an asset or a couple of assets that are going to be worth a lot. Maybe Bitcoin, maybe not, I don't know. But it doesn't make sense to me to have all of these assets worth a lot. I think a lot of them will go to zero. But is that going to happen tomorrow? No. I think there's going to be a journey. And so altcoin season, I think we'll probably see more of that to come.
Is Bitcoin spot ETF and Ethereum spot ETF good or bad?
I think it's good from the perspective of it's, assets that are prevalent in society make their way into financial instruments like the ETF. I think there are some people that say that's not such a good thing for society, and that it reverts a lot of the kind of inherent attributes of what Bitcoin is. Yeah, sure, I agree with that too. But if people want to hold it in a vehicle that's an ETF, more power to them. I think that people should have choice, and I think it's a natural evolution of where we've come from and where we're going. I think there'll be more traditional financial instruments to do with crypto assets as we go forward. And I also think this kind of that question often comes from people where they're saying, okay, it's the Bitcoin people or the crypto people versus the bankers. And I have a view that there will be a merging of these worlds over time, and that banks will be offering crypto asset services and crypto asset providers will be offering banking services, and that there'll be a consolidation of these different types of services into the kind of financial institutions of the future. So I don't think that dichotomy is a false dichotomy. And I think that we'll start seeing crypto being integrated. And soon, I think, we'll be talking about crypto as traditional finance.
You're based in Johannesburg.
So VALR's headquarters is Johannesburg, yes.
Okay, you're expanding to the world, or is it just Asia for now?
We are obviously an internet company. So we exist globally on the internet where we can exist, right? There are certain places where we don't serve the population for regulatory reasons. So we are expanding globally. But as far as a strategic imperative, right now we're looking at Asia, we're looking at Europe as some of the main areas that we're going into. There's an emphasis of where we're going proactively, but hopefully we get our word out about who we are to the world, and we welcome people from all parts of the world. And then we'll also continually reflect on where we are, where we see our services are being most used. Will we need to kind of pivot and start focusing on different parts of the world? That always happens in business. You need to be open to kind of moving and adapting to your reality.
I think people still consider this early stage of crypto, and a lot of people are still not in crypto. I feel like the majority of the world is still unfamiliar with crypto. Any words of encouragement for people that are new to the market or are just discovering this magical world?
I think what I would say is I really encourage people to be a bit more humble with their approach to something that's new. Because everybody comes at it with a preconceived notion of what it is, a preconceived notion that they understand it, or that a particular narrative is correct. And so I really propose that people come with an open mind and also question their understanding of what money is, the money that they know of, the money that they use every day, not crypto. And once you come with an open mind, then the world of possibilities opens up and you start learning so much. And then you can determine what this asset class can do to you or what it can do for the world with a much more open mind to be able to see what reality is. I think oftentimes knowledge can be a barrier because you think you know, but actually your mind is so puny, and what you actually understand is just a very small sliver of what reality is, and that you have the arrogance to think that you are all knowing and that you miss out so much. So I think sometimes you need to put your own knowledge at put it aside to kind of just look with fresh eyes to see what makes sense and what doesn't. And oftentimes you see a lot of magic when you can kind of achieve that.
Do you think we're too late? Or if a person's joining now?
No, it is so early. It is so early. I really think it is so early. A lot of what's happening right now is speculation. But crypto hasn't impacted the world anywhere close to the possibility that it has to affect tremendous transformation in our financial system globally. If the narrative is right, that there's going to be a tremendous change and the world's financial system is going to move and have a paradigm shift, but it's one or the, it's not going to stay where it is right now, that's for sure. So we're either very, very early and we're going to go like north in a very big way, or this is going to collapse. But it's not going to be chilling. Like the price of Bitcoin is not going to be chilling at $60,000. That's for sure.
So it's all or nothing.
I think it is progress or regress. So I think we're either going to progress or we're going to go forward or we're going to go backward. But we're not going to be just maintaining where we are right now. That's not what life is about.
Any last words?
I think we covered a lot. Thank you very much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I think, the only thing I would just invite people, more and more people, to kind of question what they're doing if they're trying to help advance society, make the world a little bit of a better place. I think we need a lot more love in the world. I think we need a spirit of camaraderie in a very divided world at the moment. We talked a lot about unity, and I really hope people will join me in trying to kind of make that vision reality. But most of all, thank you to you for a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed meeting you and chatting to you, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was amazing talking to you. See you in South Africa.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Bonnie.
谢谢你看到这里哦，欢迎用下面的连结到 Line 跟 Discord 群组，跟努力的大家一起讨论。我们在 OKX、币安、派网呢，跟其他的大交易所都帮大家争取到了最高8折 20% off 的交易手续费减免。用下面的连结注册呢，你的交易成本就更低了。也欢迎告诉我你接下来想要看什么，我们在币圈继续努力，下一次见，拜拜。